Hello, Slashies, and welcome to Slashed, a horror podcast where we talk about the scares, the screams, and the spooky stuff. My name is Grace.
And my name is Wouter, and today we'll be talking about the film His House, which is currently on Netflix. And we sort of just stumbled upon this one while we were flicking through Netflix, because we have been sort of film and series deprived during this lovely little staying at home pandemic. And then this little gem came across our paths, and we were both very eager to watch it, and I'm very glad we did.
Yeah, I think when we saw it, we were just like, okay, we're gonna watch it and then also review it.
Yeah,
we just knew.
We knew. We hoped that it would be as good as it was, and it was. So without further ado, let's get into this. Grace, would you please grace us again with a lovely synopsis?
Thank you. His House is a 2020 horror film written and directed by Remy Weeks, based on a story by Felicity Evans and Toby Venables. I did not think this was the name that I would struggle with. It stars Shopei Dirizu and Wumi Musaku as Bol and Rial Major, a married couple that fled South Sudan to seek asylum in the UK. Tragically, their daughter Nyagek did not survive the boat trip. At the beginning of the film, Bol and Rial are granted probational asylum and will be assigned a new home in Britain. Quickly after moving in, the house reveals itself to be a living nightmare, and Bol becomes plagued with visions of the dead. Rial is convinced that it is all the doing of an apeth, a type of sea witch that haunts the home of thieves. The apeth has promised Rial to bring back Nyagek if he can have Bol's life in return. During the day, Bol denies the witch's existence, and he does everything in his power to assimilate to the British lifestyle. At night, he confronts the apeth and tears down the walls of the house. The relationship between Bol and Rial grows increasingly hostile. Rial wants to return home, but Bol wants to stay in Britain at all cost. Things come to a head when Rial tries to get away from Bol through the window and injures herself in the process. This sparks a flashback that reveals that she never had a daughter at all. Bol took Nyagek from her mother at a refugee bus in order to get access and to ensure that Rial and he could go to Britain together. While this saved his life and possibly Rial's, it doomed Nyagek's real mother. The experience was so traumatic that Rial internalized the lie, and she truly believed that she was the girl's mother. The flashback allows her to come to terms with what really happened. When she wakes up, Bol tells her that he has accepted his fate and he will allow the apeth to kill him in order to save Nyagek. In the end, Rial refuses to let him go through with it, and she kills the witch, saving Bol and their mutual chance of happiness. The film ends with Bol and Rial accepting the house as their new home, and the ghosts that come with it.
Yes, thank you very much. Do you want a sip of water, or are you good?
Yeah, I'll get us some water.
Here you go.
Oh, thanks so much.
I've always got water handy. Please hydrate yourself. So, thank you. His House. Where to start? Let's just start off with the name.
So, the name is immediately interesting because it's his house. It's not their house. It's not our house.
No.
And I think that feeling is shared throughout the film. It's the main struggle between the couple, or at least how that struggle is presented, which is that Rial never feels at home in Britain. Through her eyes, it's this very hostile, unwelcome environment, and she dreams of being back home with her daughter. And meanwhile, Bol is still so very haunted by the trauma of the war that he can't even allow himself to think of another home. This has to be it. They cannot go back. And I think it's also partially about the responsibility that a man feels for keeping the house.
Yeah, providing for his family, which in this case is Rial, and you think was the daughter until you find out it isn't the daughter. And this comes into play quite literally at some point where this is near the end game of the film, where Bol goes to his social worker, I guess we'll call him, played by Matt Smith.
Yeah.
And he pleads him, we need another house. Doesn't matter where, if any house will do. And it really shows that going back isn't necessarily an option for him, as you said, but he still feels the need to provide a new house for him and Rial.
Yeah, it's something that the director Remy Weeks said as well in an interview, that he really wanted to touch upon that specific experience that men have, where it is this, you feel the burden of the house on your shoulders. And I think it's also, he talks about a very specific kind of survivor's guilt, I suppose.
Yes.
And that is, guilt is at the core of this story, where Paul feels this guilt that he took Nyagek's mother's place, and in a way took Nyagek's place by ensuring that he was on the bus, ensuring that he was on a boat, making sure that he and Rial were fine, that they would survive. That was his main goal. And I do think that there's this idea that men perhaps are less deserving of being saved. It's this idea of, women and children and first. And I do know in the Netherlands as well, where I don't want to call it a refugee crisis, but that's at least what the papers call it, where there was a lot of suspicion against men who would seek asylum alone.
Yeah.
Almost as if why would a man need asylum? Shouldn't you be back home fighting or whatever?
Yeah, the term freeloader was thrown around a bunch in
really,
media.
It was really awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is still awful. It is still ongoing. So I think it was a really good choice to focus on that masculine experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then that guilt is sort of pursued throughout the film, because once Bol and Rial have made it, he needs to make good use of the time he has bought himself, because he's, like, in his mind he's living on borrowed time, because really he should have been dead, he should have been left behind. And then that pain of not being able to provide for your wife or for the ones you love becomes even more poignant, because the life he took from Nyagek and her mother then basically becomes a waste, because he's not making good use of it in his mind, because he's not even living it to the fullest, because he lives in crappy conditions, he can't improve his conditions, but he also can't do anything about the fact that they're there, because that's the whole reason that they're there, is because they made it in the first place. And
the only thing he can do is try to focus on, okay, this is our home, this is our house, we have to make it look nice, we have to live the way respected people live in this country. So we have to eat at a table, and we have to use cutlery. We have to dress the way the British advertisements tell us.
Yeah.
We have to live up to that standard. And I think it's really heartbreaking to see how he pushes himself in this direction to live up to this perceived ideal and to justify for himself that he has taken this spot.
Yeah, and the clothes, now that you mentioned that, because I found that scene especially poignant, especially looking back on it. The scene basically is he feels the need to fit in, and they still, especially Rial, wears semi-traditional clothing, or at least clothing that she came in.
Yeah, the fashion from there.
Yeah, exactly. And Bol wants to fit in more, so he goes to a clothing store.
I would say it's a Pennies or a Primark.
Yeah,
I don't say so, but it
has the vibe.
It has to be that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's say it's a Pennies. And the second he walks in, the security guard is leering at him the whole time. Like, he's just on his phone drinking a coffee, and as soon as he, the only person of color in the store, walks in, he is just leering at him in the background. And that is so painful to watch, because this is, in that moment, a man who is trying his absolute hardest to fit in. And for a moment he steps into the scene, he's racially profiled.
Yeah.
And then he looks, and he is flicking through some clothes, and then he's looking around, and then, as you said, he sees an advertisement on the wall, and he just buys the exact clothes that the perfect British family on that wall are wearing. So then he comes back wearing the exact grey polo shirt and trousers that the man is wearing, and he brought Spencer, I think. No, not Spencer, a sweater for Rial that the wife was wearing in the picture. And it's so saddening, because it's so dull and grey, and it just takes all the colour out of their characters and out of their sort of emotion.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was just so hard to. That was maybe even, and that tone is sort of set from the get go of the film, and that just made it all the more tense.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just see them in an asylum seekers center, just cradling each other, and you're just the way they are treated and looked at by the workers. Like they're not even like they're second class citizens, but like they're children almost.
Yeah.
Especially when they're being screened for relocation.
Please say yes if you understand.
Yeah, even though it's clearly established that they speak English perfectly well.
Mm-hmm.
Dude used to work at a bank, and I can assume that Rial also had a perfectly respectable job.
Yeah, which doesn't mean that you need to speak English to have a perfectly respectable job, but like they are proficient. Like there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, they're clearly proficient, educated.
Yeah, and it's that idea that they aren't allowed to even ask questions, or at some point, Paul wants to basically thank them and tell them we're good people and we'll do good by this decision, and it's just cut off, and it's like, oh, we don't care. Just say yes if you understand the question, and that's it.
Yeah.
And I think that's that vibe. I mean, obviously we're coming into this with this outsider perspective, and you try to follow what the situation is that the refugees, that people that are seeking asylum live in, and it feels very sheltered of me to say that I was so shocked seeing it on the screen, and the real horror was almost the way that, or is the way that they are treated in Britain, but it was so effectively done, and I'm just going to admit that I was really shocked by it.
Yeah, same, me too. And what I do really like about that scene where they're being screened, which also cuts back to the guilt that Ball feels, he says, we are good people, and then the guy who screened him says, oh, I'm not the one you need to convince.
Yeah.
And he is talking about the higher ups, but also, of course, the film is talking about they need to convince themselves that they're good people. And everything in the system is telling them that they're not wanted, that they're not going to fit in. And that just, that what you said, it just is so shocking to watch. And that's the brilliance of this film, I feel, is that is shocking, but then the rest of the film, which is just not just but a very well crafted, very tense, very disturbing haunted house story, and they coexist so beautifully.
Yeah,
it
so
works.
Well done.
It works so the one doesn't overshadow the other, because there's just no breathing room for these people.
Yeah,
it's just both in there, and it's both just
it feeds
a
into
perfect
each
circle.
other.
It feeds into each other exactly. And this is one of those films, we've talked about this a lot, that works so nicely, both on a literal level and on a metaphorical level.
Yeah.
Because you can take this as the witch is real, the ghosts are real, the whole struggle at the end is real, where Bol tries to sacrifice himself to the Apeth, and Rial saves him, and then the spirits have been appeased, and then they live in peace with the spirits of those they have lost along the way.
Yeah.
Or you can see it as them struggling with this survivor's guilt, coming to terms with it, and then living with the past, holding on to the past as sort of a safe haven for them in this hostile and unfamiliar environment. Yeah. And from the ashes of the past, building a new home.
And I think it's such a beautiful ending that it's not them letting go of, they let go of the guilt, but they don't let go of the memories of the people.
Yeah.
And it's actually that Bo even says it, like, I think almost literally, like, I was able to let go of those feelings as soon as I let the ghosts in.
Yeah.
And I think that was just really beautifully done. And just to circle back to the Britain as this hostile environment thing, what I really liked is that there are clearly these systems that are trying to help them. So you have the caseworker who is in a way trying to help them in this home, and at some point Ball is walking past a church, and a guy yells at him, "Are you one of those refugees? I've got something for you." But even that guy sounds so incredibly aggressive that I thought he was going to be like, "I've got something for you, it's my fist." And it was just like a kind of a care package. So even the systems that are there to help them are shot in a very
clunky.
Well, not clunky, just nothing is warm. Nothing is warm about the way they are being treated. And it's reflected in the light as well, and the colors they use. Everything outside of the house is very bright, very cold, bright colors.
Lots of white light. I found it especially just hard to physically watch when Bol is walking through the supermarket, where he's just bombarded with all these bright colored signs of discounts and these bright white overhead lights. And it must be such a jarring experience for the character to just walk there and sort of just walk in this pristine world and pretend everything is fine.
Yeah.
That is sort of the burden that is forced onto them. Like, we are giving you this and you have to live here and pretend that you're fine.
Yeah.
Because you'll be screened weekly and hand in reports. And if they come up short, it will kick you out.
And so like Rial says, you basically get the scraps and you have to say please and thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much to talk about, and we haven't even really got into the supernatural element.
No.
Because at the core, this is a haunted house film.
Yes.
And I'm so glad we finally got to do one. I don't feel like we've done a really properly supernatural film, have we?
No, we...
Unless you count the lighthouse, but I wouldn't say
I wouldn't
that is...
say the lighthouse is a... No.
No.
No, I agree. That's not a haunted house film necessarily.
Yeah.
No, yeah, we haven't... No, we haven't done any.
Hereditary a little bit.
Yeah, but those are just some weird demon cult, it turns out. So that doesn't count. So we're still upset about that.
I'm so glad we finally got to do one. And it was so scary.
Yeah.
Because we've been watching a lot of movies that we'll probably review in the future. And honestly, I haven't watched anything in a while that just gave me the creeps. And they said, like, I was squeezing your hand.
Oh, man.
And I almost never do, right?
No, you... usually me who goes for your hand. And we watched... Sinister this weekend, which we're not going to go into further, but Sinister I thought was really scary, but this just blew that out of the water. I was so unnerved, because I don't even know what it is, because I couldn't even tell you what sets this apart from any other haunted house movie, because it has all the building blocks in there, just a dark creaky house, footsteps all around, people humming like voices, it's all fairly cookie cutter stuff. I can't put my finger on it why it works so well. I couldn't say. Can you?
I think for me, first of all, this movie doesn't waste time. It's really short. It's an hour and a half, I think. Yep. And what a lot of haunted house films do is that they spend a good hour, sometimes even, just setting up the ghost.
Yeah.
So doors slam shut. You hear footsteps. A child's laughter. Things like that, and it just takes for ages, and you're like, I know this is going to be a haunted house film, that's why I'm here, just bring on the ghost,
bring the spookies.
Yeah. And this film just goes straight into it. Like, first night that he hears something inside of the wall.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that they went there. And I think what works so well is the way Rial puts it. They've been through so much. How could a ghost scare them? Like, they've seen what men can do. How can ghosts scare them? And it's because it's not creepy ghosts. It is creepy ghosts that attack them and do stuff like that and make Bol see all these really scary visions. But it's not scary because they're ghosts. It's scary because they are specifically manifestations of his trauma.
Yes.
It's because they show him the ocean that Nyarkek drowned in, the ocean that he nearly drowned in. That's what makes it terrifying.
Yeah, and the ocean that he, in a way, is still drowning in. Because he's just trying to keep his head above the water, but then every night he just, when he's alone with his thoughts, he just gets pulled down.
Yeah.
And there's this beautiful, beautiful shot that we thought for a good moment was going to be the end of the film, where they are sitting in their kitchen at the table, as he suggested. And then insisted on, yeah. The shot cuts to just Bol, because Rial's at the other side of the table. And then it cuts back and Rial's gone. And then you pan out from I'm making hand movements that you can't see. You pan out from the kitchen and it's just the kitchen floating with just the wall and the stove and him at the table floating in the middle of the ocean.
Beautiful orange lighting.
Yeah, and you just sort of, while you only hear the clinking of the fork on the plate as he's sort of angrily chowing down on the crappy food that they can buy with their £74 a week. And it's just such an awesome visual and just such a good encapsulation of the helplessness and just the endless expanse of no promise of a better future, just an endless ocean of
and how he just
sorrow
ignores it.
Yeah.
How he just literally averts his eyes and tries to focus on this little pied-à-terre that he's got.
Mm-hmm. And where he is by himself because
Rial isn't there.
Rial isn't there mentally.
Yeah, I just want to say, and this almost never gets mentioned, but the lighting is it's so superb. I really shout out to the director of photography for that.
Yeah,
so well done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I really like the scene where he confronts the Apeth for the first time.
So good.
Where he has lit a candle, because candles are like a minor thing. It's one of the rules in the house: don't light candles, and then they of course go about lighting candles. And then he lights a candle and waits out the Apeth. Mm-hmm. And then the daylight sort of dims, and it's just him and the candlelight, and you see his face beautifully lit by just a candle. And then you just see these two beady eyes across from the candlelight, and then he starts talking to him. And it just was really reminiscent of that scene in The Witch with the devil at the end.
Yeah.
Where the Apeth is just whispering his darkest thoughts to him and basically talking him into self-harming or suicide by getting over his guilt.
His flesh for him.
Yeah, opening his flesh for him so he can literally get under his skin.
Yeah. I will say that as much as I love that scene, I am not a huge fan of the look of the Apeth in the end. It reminded me a lot of the Moonlight Man from Gerald's Game, which is a Stephen King film. And I thought it was a little bit done in that way. Like, it was so scary, especially when it was just eyes in darkness, it was so much scarier than when he came out and it was this saggy skeleton flesh man. Yeah.
Basically all the ghosts look like zombies in some form or another.
But they had interesting, like, kind of mask-like faces, and I would have liked that more.
Yeah, definitely.
It could have been a shadow, in my opinion. It would have been maybe better.
Yeah, but with the ending they made, they needed something corporeal because otherwise Rial couldn't slit its throat.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of zombies, I really like that scene where I really liked the sort of juxtaposition between like the first scene where Bol faces all the ghosts at once. Like, he walks into the bedroom and the bedroom is just crawling with these zombie-like figures who are clearly all the people who didn't make it along the way. And they just start swarming him and sort of groping him and touching him and like wailing at him. And he is frightened nearly to death, you know. He's crying, screaming, sweating, and it's really grueling to watch. And then near the end of the film, when Rial jumps out the window and goes into her sort of
dream sequence flashback.
Yeah, she walks into a room where there's all the women from her village, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Maybe her colleagues, because she's in a school. Maybe they're all teachers. And they are singing a sort of traditional song, and it's really peaceful and it's beautifully lit, and they are all caressing her, embracing her, and I just think the symmetry between those scenes really shows how they are both dealing so differently with this trauma. Like, she has found peace in the lie and in the thought that she once had a daughter and they've lost her now, but now they're together here and they'll have to move on. And he has found only anguish in the guilt that he has killed a mother and a child so they could live. Both
are wrong.
Yes.
Both are something that they need to step out of if they want to actually move forward in real life. I think that's really, really interesting. Did the look of Nyagek's mask remind you of the little boy from Us?
Did it? Let me Google that real quick. Was it Pluto?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Why the mask? Why does it look like that? Does that have any significance?
I thought it was because he couldn't face her.
Oh, it's just because
he couldn't look at her properly.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's easier to think of her as a monster than as just a human girl of what, maybe 8 years old?
Terrified little girl.
Yeah. And maybe he's forcing himself to live through her fear as well. He is forcing himself into her shoes, and maybe making himself live through her anguish, and thereby he can sort of let go of his own. If I suffer like she suffered, I will repent.
Definitely, because there's a moment in the film where he turns the light off specifically to see her again.
Yeah. And of course, on first viewing, you think, oh, it's because he missed his daughter. But then once you've seen the ending, you realize indeed what you said, that he
is already accepting that he must trade his life for hers.
Yes, which is just chef's kiss.
So well done, so well seated.
It's genius. It is.
Yeah, I think this is a rare case where the twist is just so good, so meaningful, fits the film so well, adds so many layers, and is just so wholly deserved.
Yeah, and you could have seen it coming, I guess, if you pay real close attention. But this is a really good twist.
Yeah. At some point, I wondered if they were going to go for that Nyagak was Rial's daughter from an a previous relationship.
Right.
So she wasn't his daughter technically, but I never saw this coming.
No, and but the film drops such obvious hints, or not that obvious, but it drops some nice hints, like you pointed out when we were watching it, or after we watched it. Fairly early on in the film, they both agree that they've been cursed, and Ball's solution is to burn all their stuff because they have brought the curse with them, and they need to start anew.
Yeah.
And it includes a teddy bear and a doll and whatever. And how it makes so much more sense, because it isn't their stuff, it's stuff from the child.
Yeah.
And he wants to get rid of that memory and hopefully get rid of the witch or that brought the spirit of the dead girl along.
And also when they're talking about starting their new life there, Ball says, we could start a family. And you see Raoul thinking, how could you say that? We are a family, we were a family. But they weren't. They
weren't, no. And that stood out to me. It was so weird. And I figured it was just a really extreme way of him starting over. So that takes on a whole different meaning when you know the twist.
And that also worked. And that's what makes it a good scene.
Definitely. And makes it a good film as well. I think I could happily watch this a second time and just enjoy it for the great horror flick that it is, and knowing the twist will probably only make it harder to watch because you know what they're working towards. And it's just really more sad than scary in the end. It's a really tense and scary film, but it's just really tragic.
I'm so glad it does have a happy ending in that sense, that Rial saves him, and they find each other again, and they find the path again to having that new life, and saying, I think I'll paint this room red and this is our home. It's just you're rooting for them so much, and it's so nice that you get to have that happy ending in the end. And I think it needed that happy ending.
Yeah.
I think the director said himself he didn't want it to be this completely bleak story. There are no happy endings and it'll always end in pain and death. But just to show that there is a way to, not overcome, but to live with trauma and to forge a new path.
Yes, exactly. And I am really happy that the happy ending consists of them living with the ghosts of the past.
Yeah.
Sort of finding solace in those you've lost, but also letting them be part of your life.
Yeah.
Dead but not gone.
So good.
So good, yeah. I'm doubting whether I should mention this because it stood out to me, but it might be really far-fetched. Because the whole thing is that this is sort of not really attached to this. So Ball at some point takes a hammer to the walls because he's convinced the witch lives in the walls. So there's huge gaping holes in the walls all throughout the film. And then at the end, they've patched up the walls. So they finally found a home now, but they've had to patch up the home with whiteness.
Oh, okay.
Is that too far-fetched?
I don't think that's what they were going for.
No.
That is just what plaster looks like.
I know, the cluster of color doesn't exist, but
I mean, it does look like it's clearly mended.
Yes.
I think it's more that. I'm thinking that's more what they're going for.
Yeah.
I don't think they were saying assimilation is the key.
No, I don't think they were saying that, no.
Hmm.
No, because that would have made it more sad, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe mended is a better word. Maybe it's a better take on it because they had to tear down some of the old grief to put something new there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked to see the decorated room, but I get that isn't what they wanted to do.
No.
They wanted to show the hope that they were going to make it their home, and perhaps would have been a bit too sweet if it had been incredibly nice looking.
Mm-hmm.
Although there's still the threat that they are not going to be able to stay, yeah.
Because they are being reported on at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But I do really like that Ball says at the end, "This is our home," because he kept saying, "This is my house."
I think Rial says it.
Does she? Oh,
yeah, which is even better.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do think they wanted to show that Matt Smith is going to pull through for them. So
yeah, because they're not making him out to be a bad guy. He's clearly, but they're clearly just impatient with them, sort of.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's all being treated like they're doing them a favor, like, oh, we are giving you a house, and he keeps saying, oh, it's a palace and it's much bigger than my own home, and there's this undertone like you should be so grateful to receive this because you're not fully deserving of it, which of course ties into all the other things we talked about.
Yeah.
And there's this, I don't know what the word would be in English, but in Dutch it's misgunnen. You cannot bring yourself to wish good things on someone.
No, you cannot take for granted that other people are happy. Or,
I guess, yeah. It has no translation.
That's not a translation. I was trying to clarify it even more, but that's a thing that doesn't really translate well, which says something about Dutch culture.
Also talking about Dutch culture, the scene where he is the beautiful scene that we talked about, where it's just this pan of a bull eating in the kitchen and in an ocean, and he's just aggressively mashing his food, is Dutch vibes.
Yeah,
that was Dutch core.
Yeah.
Aggressively mashing your food is Dutch culture.
Yes, while soaking wet.
Yeah.
Oh. Yes, that seems like a perfect note to end the goddamn podcast on.
Yeah, in any case, I'm really looking forward to what Remy Weeks is going to do next. We'll keep an eye on him.
Yes, and on the actors as well, because they both did stellar jobs.
So
especially the lady who played Rial, I thought was really good.
Woomy.
Woomy.
I think you don't pronounce the N. Yeah.
No. So big shout out to them. Woomy Musaku. And
Shope
Dirizu. Just everyone is just great. The whole thing is just awesome. It's perfect. Just just perfection. That's all I can say.
Yeah.
And I think on that note, I've been Wouter.
I've been Grace, and you've been slashed.